The conference room fell silent as I slid the signed contract across the mahogany table. 24 hours earlier, I was about to close the biggest deal of my career. Now, I was sitting across from their biggest competitor, watching my former CEO's face drain of color through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the rival's corporate headquarters. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and until yesterday at 4:30 p.m., I was the Senior Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions at Pinnacle Financial Group in downtown Chicago. For 18 months, I had been orchestrating what would become the largest financial services merger in the Midwest's history. A $2.8 billion acquisition of regional banking consortium that would reshape the entire industry landscape. The deal had consumed my life. 80-hour weeks became my norm. My apartment in Lincoln Park collected dust while I practically lived at the office, surviving on takeout sushi and espresso shots from the building's cafe. My younger sister Carmen stopped inviting me to family dinners because I'd canceled, on her kids' birthdays 3 times in a row. My dating life? What dating life? But none of that mattered because this merger was my masterpiece. I had identified Regional Banking Consortium as the perfect acquisition target 2 years prior, long before anyone else saw their potential. While other firms dismissed them as a struggling regional player, I recognized their hidden value. A robust customer base in untapped markets, cutting-edge fintech infrastructure they'd quietly developed, and most importantly, regulatory approvals that would take any competitor years to obtain. The numbers were staggering. Regional banking held assets worth $8.2 billion, but their market valuation had plummeted due to temporary liquidity issues and negative press from a small scandal involving their former CFO's expense reports. The media had blown the story out of proportion. It was barely $200,000 in questionable charges, but the market overreacted, driving their stock price down 40% in 6 months. I saw opportunity where others saw risk. While regional banking stock traded at historic lows, their fundamental business remained solid. Their customer retention rates exceeded industry averages by 12%. Their loan default rates were among the lowest in the sector. Most crucially, they had just received preliminary approval for 3 new branch locations in markets where Pinnacle had been trying to establish presence for over a decade. My initial pitch to Pinnacle's board had been met with skepticism. CEO Jonathan Whitmore, a man who wore his Harvard MBA like a badge of honor and never let anyone forget his family's old money connections, questioned every aspect of my analysis. He challenged my market projections, criticized my valuation models, and demanded I present additional due diligence reports every 2 weeks. "Martinez," he'd said during one particularly brutal board meeting, adjusting his gold cufflinks, "you're asking us to bet the company's future on your hunches. I need concrete proof this isn't career suicide," so I gave him concrete proof. I spent the next 6 months building an ironclad case. I traveled to every regional banking branch, interviewed their management team, analyzed their customer demographics, and even hired external auditors to verify their financial statements. I created detailed integration plans, projected synergy savings, and mapped out the timeline for regulatory approvals. The breakthrough came when I discovered Regional Banking's proprietary mobile banking platform had features that major competitors were still trying to develop. Their app processed transactions 15% faster than industry standards and had pioneered a security protocol that eliminated the need for traditional password authentication. This technology alone was worth hundreds of millions in licensing potential. Armed with this intelligence, I restructured the entire deal. Instead of a simple acquisition, I proposed a merger that would leverage Regional Banking's technology while utilizing Pinnacle's capital resources and established client base. The combined entity would control 32% of the regional market and generate projected annual revenues of $1.4 billion. Whitmore's tune changed overnight. Suddenly, My project became his top priority. He assigned me a team of 12 analysts and gave me access to the firm's most expensive legal counsel. The board approved a preliminary offer of $2.8 billion, a premium price that would make Regional Banking's shareholders very happy while still delivering substantial value to Pinnacle's investors. The negotiation phase lasted 8 grueling months. Regional Banking's CEO, Patricia Stevens, was a shrewd negotiator who had built her company from a small community bank into a regional powerhouse. She knew her company's worth and wasn't about to accept a lowball offer, despite the recent stock price decline. Our first meeting took place at a neutral location, a private dining room at the Chicago Athletic Association. Stevens arrived with her general counsel and chief financial officer, while I brought Pinnacle's head of legal affairs and our chief investment officer. The atmosphere was cordial but tense. Stevens opened with a counteroffer of $3.2 billion, citing the hidden value in their technology assets and growth potential in emerging markets. I had anticipated this move and came prepared with comparative analysis, showing similar deals in the sector had closed at lower multiples. We spent 4 hours debating valuation methodologies, market conditions, and integration risks. The real breakthrough came during our third meeting when I shifted the conversation from price to vision. Instead of focusing on what Pinnacle would pay for regional banking, I presented a comprehensive plan for what the combined companies could achieve together. I showed Stevens how her technology could be scaled across Pinnacle's entire network, potentially creating licensing revenue streams worth hundreds of millions annually. This isn't just an acquisition, I told her, spreading detailed charts across the conference table. This is about creating the dominant financial services platform in the Midwest. Your innovation, our resources, shared success. Stevens leaned back in her chair, studying the projections. After a long pause, she smiled. Ms. Martinez, you're the first person from Pinnacle who's talked about partnership instead of takeover. Let's discuss terms. From that point forward, negotiations accelerated rapidly. We agreed on a merger structure that would give Regional Banking shareholders $2.8 billion in combined cash and Pinnacle stock. Stevens would join Pinnacle's board of directors and retain operational control over the technology division. Her key employees would receive retention bonuses and equity stakes in the merged company. The due diligence phase revealed even more value than I had initially projected. Regional Banking's customer base was growing at 12% annually, significantly outpacing industry averages. Their commercial lending portfolio showed exceptional quality with default rates below 2%. Most importantly, their regulatory compliance record was spotless, crucial for smooth approval of the merger. By month 14 of the process, we had secured preliminary approval from state banking regulators and received positive feedback from federal oversight agencies. The legal documentation was 90% complete. Investment banks on both sides had confirmed the financing structure. Everything was proceeding exactly according to my carefully orchestrated timeline. The final hurdle was Pinnacle's board approval, scheduled for a special meeting on Thursday, October 15th. I had spent weeks preparing my presentation, refining every slide, anticipating every possible question or objection. The merger documents were printed and bound, ready for signatures. Regional Banking's board had already given their unanimous approval, conditional on Pinnacle's final decision. Wednesday afternoon, I conducted my final review with the legal team. Every contract clause had been scrutinized, every regulatory requirement satisfied, every financial projection verified. The deal was flawless, a career-defining achievement that would establish me as one of the premier deal-makers in the industry. The Thursday morning board meeting went exactly as planned. I presented for 45 minutes, walking through the strategic rationale, financial projections, and implementation timeline. Board members asked thoughtful questions about integration challenges, regulatory risks, and competitive responses. Each inquiry was met with detailed answers backed by 18 months of meticulous research. When I finished, the room fell silent. Then board member Margaret Chen, founder of a successful venture capital firm, began to applaud. One by one, the other directors joined in. Whitmore nodded approvingly from the head of the table. "Outstanding work, Martinez," he said. "This is exactly the kind of transformative deal Pinnacle needs to maintain our competitive edge. You've exceeded every expectation." The vote was unanimous. Pinnacle Financial Group officially approved the $2.8 billion merger with Regional Banking Consortium. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 5 p.m. that same day, followed by a press conference to announce the deal to the financial media. I spent the afternoon coordinating final details with both legal teams, confirming that all parties would be present for the signing and reviewing talking points for the press conference. Regional Banking's executives had flown in from Milwaukee specifically for the ceremony. Investment bankers from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were standing by to execute the financing arrangements. At 4:25 p.m., I was in my office, adjusting my blazer and reviewing my notes one final time before heading to the signing ceremony. The contracts were already in the conference room, organized in perfect order for each signatory. Champagne was chilling in the executive break room, ready for the post-signing celebration. That's when Whitmore's assistant knocked on my door. "Ms. Martinez, Mr. Whitmore needs to see you immediately in his office." Sarah's voice carried an unusual tension that made my stomach clench. In 3 years of working with Whitmore's assistant, I had never heard that particular edge in her tone. Something was wrong. I followed Sarah down the marble-floored hallway to Whitmore's corner office, my heels clicking rhythmically against the stone. The executive floor was unusually quiet for a Thursday afternoon. Most of the senior staff should have been preparing for the signing ceremony, but the hallways seemed almost deserted. Whitmore's office door was closed. Sarah knocked twice and opened it without waiting for a response. "She's here, sir." I stepped inside to find Whitmore seated behind his massive oak desk, but he wasn't alone. Thomas Bradley, Pinnacle's chief legal officer, sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk. Next to him was someone I didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s wearing a charcoal gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase that screamed corporate attorney. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Rebecca, please sit down." Whitmore's voice was cold, professional, completely different from the warm congratulations he'd offered just hours earlier. I took the remaining chair, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Regional Banking discovered some last-minute issue? Was there a problem with the regulatory approvals? My palms began to sweat despite the office's air conditioning. The unknown woman opened her briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. She placed it on the desk between us and looked directly at me. "Ms. Martinez, my name is Victoria Hartwell from Steinberg, Mason & Associates. I'm here representing Pinnacle Financial Group in a personnel matter." Personnel matter. The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about the merger. This was about me. Whitmore leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca, it has come to our attention that you may have engaged in activities that conflict with your fiduciary duties to this company." "I'm sorry, what?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "What activities? What are you talking about?" Hartwell opened the folder and withdrew several documents. "We have evidence suggesting you've been in communication with competitors regarding confidential information about the Regional Banking merger." My heart stopped. That's absolutely false. I've never shared confidential information with anyone outside the approved deal team. These phone records suggest otherwise. Bradley slid a printout across the desk. It showed a list of phone numbers with dates and call durations spanning the past 6 months. I scanned the numbers, recognizing none of them. I don't know what these are, but I've never called any of these numbers. This has to be some kind of mistake. 3 of these numbers belong to executives at Meridian Capital Group, Hartwell said, her voice matter of fact. Your calls to them coincide precisely with key milestones in the regional banking negotiations. Meridian Capital Group. They were one of the largest private equity firms in Chicago, known for aggressive acquisition strategies and hostile takeovers. They were also Pinnacle's biggest competitor in the regional banking sector. I've never spoken to anyone at Meridian Capital Group, ever. I don't even know anyone who works there. My voice was rising, panic creeping in despite my efforts to stay calm. Whitmore picked up another document from the folder. There's also the matter of the Henderson account. The Henderson account. 6 months ago, I had identified a potential acquisition target, a small investment firm called Henderson Associates. I'd done preliminary research and prepared a brief analysis, but the deal never moved forward because Henderson's owners decided not to sell. What about Henderson Associates? Our investigation shows that immediately after you identified Henderson as a potential target, Meridian Capital Group approached them with a competing offer, Bradley explained. Henderson ultimately chose not to sell to anyone, but the timing raises serious questions. I stared at them in disbelief. Are you seriously suggesting I fed information to Meridian? Why would I do that? What possible motivation could I have? Hartwell consulted her notes. Our forensic accounting team discovered several unusual financial transactions in your personal accounts over the past year. Large cash deposits that don't align with your salary or known income sources. Large cash deposits? My mind raced through my recent financial activity. You mean the money from selling my grandmother's house in Phoenix? I inherited it last year and sold it in March. The probate documents are public record. The deposits? We're referring to occurred before your grandmother's house sale, Hartwell continued calmly. 5 separate cash deposits totaling $87,000 over a 6-month period. This was insane. I had never received any unexplained money. My financial life was an open book. Salary, small savings account, student loan payments, and rent. Where were they getting this information? I want to see these records, I demanded. I want to see exactly what transactions you're talking about, because I guarantee you there's an explanation for every penny in my accounts. Whitmore stood up from his desk and walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago. Rebecca, we've always valued your contributions to this company. Your work on the regional banking deal has been exceptional, but these allegations are serious, enough that we cannot proceed with you in your current role. The room started spinning. You're firing me? 30 minutes before the biggest deal in company history? A deal that I created, negotiated, and structured from beginning to end? We're placing you on immediate administrative leave pending the completion of our investigation, Bradley clarified. Your access to company systems has been suspended, and you'll need to surrender your corporate credit cards and building access badge. I couldn't breathe. 18 months of work, the defining achievement of my career, was being ripped away based on fabricated accusations and mysterious phone records I'd never seen before. This is ridiculous. You know me. You know my work. I've never done anything to compromise this company's interests. Ever. Hartwell's expression remained neutral. The investigation will determine the truth. Until then, you're prohibited from contacting anyone involved in the regional banking transaction, including employees of Regional Banking Consortium. What about the signing ceremony? My voice sounded hollow, distant. The deal is supposed to close in 20 minutes. Whitmore turned back from the window. Thomas will handle the ceremony in your absence. All the documentation is complete, and the regional banking's team is already here. They were really doing this. They were stealing my deal and destroying my career based on evidence I'd never seen and accusations that made no sense. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I want copies of everything you've shown me today. Phone records, financial statements, whatever evidence you think you have. I want it all. Your attorney can request those materials through proper channels, Hartwell replied, closing her folder. My attorney? I don't have an attorney because I haven't done anything wrong. The room fell silent. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Chicago River reflecting the late afternoon sun. Somewhere 17 floors below, life was continuing normally while my world collapsed. Bradley stood and held out his hand. "Rebecca, I'll need your badge and corporate cards." With trembling fingers, I removed my building access badge from its lanyard and placed it on Whitmore's desk. My corporate American Express card followed, then my company laptop bag. "What about my personal items from my office?" "Security will box them up and mail them to your home address," Whitmore said. "You understand that you cannot return to the office during the investigation." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Jonathan, you've known me for 3 years. You've seen my work, my dedication, my results. Do you really believe I would sabotage everything I've worked for?" For just a moment, his corporate facade slipped, and I saw something that might have been regret cross his face. But it vanished quickly. "I hope the investigation proves your innocence, Rebecca." "I truly do." Sarah was waiting outside the office to escort me to the elevator. We walked in silence through the hallways where I'd spent countless hours building my career. Past the conference room where the signing ceremony would take place without me. Past my office where 18 months of research and analysis sat in carefully organized files. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. As they closed, I caught a glimpse of Thomas Bradley walking quickly toward the conference room, carrying the merger documents that should have borne my signature. I stood alone in the descending elevator, watching the floor numbers count down. 38, 37, 36. With each floor, I felt my career at Pinnacle slipping further away. The lobby was bustling with typical end-of-day activity. Employees heading home, visitors checking out at the security desk, delivery personnel making final rounds. No one looked at me twice. No one knew that the woman walking past them had just been destroyed professionally. I pushed through the revolving door onto LaSalle Street and was hit by the crisp October air. The sun was setting behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the financial district. Rush hour traffic crawled past while pedestrians hurried toward the train stations. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Carmen. "How did the big signing go? Dad wants to know if we should buy Pinnacle stock." I stared at the message, unable to formulate a response. How could I explain that the biggest professional achievement of my life had just been stolen from me? That I'd been accused of crimes I didn't commit and fired from the job I'd poured my soul into? Another text arrived. This one from my college roommate, Jessica. "Saw the news alert about the Pinnacle merger. So proud of you. Celebration drinks. Tomorrow." News alert. The press conference was probably happening right now. Thomas Bradley was likely standing at the podium, announcing the successful completion of the $2.8 billion merger, taking credit for my work while I stood on a street corner with nowhere to go. I started walking north on LaSalle, past the other financial firms and law offices that made up Chicago's business district. My mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened and figure out what to do next. The accusations made no sense. I had never communicated with anyone at Meridian Capital Group. I had never received mysterious cash deposits. I had never compromised confidential information. Yet somehow, they had documentation that suggested otherwise, which meant someone had set me up. But who? And why? What did they have to gain by destroying my career and stealing my deal? As I walked, pieces began falling into place. The timing was too convenient. The evidence was too neat. Someone had orchestrated this entire scenario, and they'd done it specifically to remove me from the regional banking merger. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Rebecca Martinez?" "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is David Chen. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Meridian Capital Group. I think we need to talk." "Meridian Capital Group?" My voice cracked slightly. "Why would you want to talk to me? According to my former employer, I've been feeding you confidential information for months." David Chen's laugh was dry, humorless. Ms. Martinez, I can assure you that Meridian has never received any information from you. In fact, until an hour ago, I didn't even know who you were. I stopped walking and ducked into the alcove of a closed boutique, pressing the phone closer to my ear. Then how did you get my number? How do you even know what happened? Because someone just tried to sell us detailed information about the regional banking merger for $250,000 cash. When we declined and reported it to our compliance department, they ran a background check on the supposed source. Your name came up. My blood ran cold. Someone tried to sell you information using my name? Not using your name exactly. They claimed to represent an anonymous source inside Pinnacle Financial Group with access to the regional banking deal documents. But when our security team traced the contact, all the digital breadcrumbs led back to Rebecca Martinez. I leaned against the building wall, my mind spinning. This is insane. Someone is framing me, but I don't understand why. Ms. Martinez, I think there's more to this story than either of us understands right now. Would you be willing to meet? I believe we might be able to help each other. Every instinct told me this was a terrible idea. Meeting with executives from Pinnacle's biggest competitor while under investigation for allegedly leaking information to that same competitor seemed like career suicide. But then again, my career was already dead. Where? There's a coffee shop called Grind on North Michigan Avenue. It's public neutral territory. Can you be there in 30 minutes? I'll be there. The walk to North Michigan took me through the heart of downtown Chicago as the evening rush hour reached its peak. Office workers streamed out of glass towers, heading toward train stations and parking garages. The ordinary rhythm of professional life continued around me while my own world had completely shattered. Grind turned out to be a trendy coffee shop with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. I spotted David Chen immediately, an Asian man in his early 40s wearing a navy suit and wire-rimmed glasses, sitting at a corner table with a laptop bag beside his chair. He stood as I approached. Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. Can I get you anything? Just water. I don't think I could keep coffee down right now. Chen returned with a bottle of water and settled back into his seat. Up close, he looked tired, like someone who'd been dealing with unexpected complications all day. Let me start by saying that Meridian Capital Group had no knowledge of your situation until this afternoon, he began. We were approached through an encrypted messaging service by someone claiming to have insider access to the regional banking merger documents. What kind of information were they offering? Everything. Financial projections, regulatory compliance reports, integration timelines, even personal details about regional banking's executives that weren't public knowledge. It was comprehensive enough to suggest genuine insider access. I took a sip of water, trying to process this information. But you didn't buy it? Absolutely not. Meridian has strict policies against corporate espionage or insider trading. We immediately reported the contact to our legal department and began investigating the source. Chen opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. This is what our security team found. The screen showed a complex digital trail, IP addresses, encrypted message routing, and financial transaction records. Even with my limited technical knowledge, I could see how someone had carefully constructed a false identity that pointed directly to me. Whoever did this was sophisticated, Chen continued. They used your personal information to create fake financial accounts, spoofed phone records, and even generated false digital communications that appeared to originate from your home computer. But why frame me specifically? What did they have to gain? That's what we need to figure out. But first, you should know that the person who approached us made a critical mistake. They offered to provide additional information after the Pinnacle Regional Banking merger was completed, suggesting they had ongoing access to both companies' internal systems. I stared at the screen, trying to understand the implications. You mean they're planning to continue this after the merger closes? It appears so. which suggests this isn't just about framing you for corporate espionage. Someone wants ongoing access to the merged company's confidential information. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. My termination wasn't just about removing me from the regional banking deal. It was about positioning someone else to have insider access to the merged entity. David, can I ask you something? Why are you helping me? What's Meridian's interest in this? Chen closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Honestly, because we've been trying to find a way into the regional banking market for 2 years. The Pinnacle Regional Banking merger creates a formidable competitor that will be very difficult to challenge. So you want to stop the merger? We want to level the playing field. And right now, you're the person who knows that deal better than anyone else alive. The implication hung in the air between us. Chen wasn't just offering to help clear my name. He was suggesting I join forces with Pinnacle's biggest competitor. You want me to work for Meridian? I want to offer you an opportunity to salvage your career while ensuring that whoever framed you doesn't get away with it. But the decision is entirely yours. I stared out the coffee shop window at the stream of evening commuters. 12 hours ago, I had been on top of the world, about to close the biggest deal of my career. Now, I was sitting in a coffee shop with a representative of my former company's biggest rival, discussing corporate espionage and career sabotage. Can you give me some time to think about this? Of course, but Ms. Martinez, there's something else you should know. Our intelligence suggests that the regional banking merger may not be as solid as it appears. What do you mean? Chen glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. We've been monitoring regional banking's financial situation very closely. Their liquidity problems are more serious than the public reports suggest. They've been moving money between subsidiaries to meet regulatory requirements, and their loan portfolio has some significant hidden risks. That's impossible. I reviewed their financials thoroughly, multiple times. You reviewed the financials they provided to Pinnacle. But our sources suggest there are additional reports that paint a different picture. My stomach dropped. If regional banking had been hiding financial problems, the entire merger could be based on false premises. Pinnacle could be acquiring a company with far more risk than anyone realized. Are you saying regional banking committed fraud? I'm saying there are questions that deserve investigation. Questions that someone clearly didn't want you asking. The implications were staggering. If regional banking had manipulated their financial reports, the merger would expose Pinnacle to billions in unexpected losses. My termination wasn't just about removing me from the deal. It was about preventing me from discovering fraud that could destroy both companies. David, I need to see this intelligence you're talking about. I can arrange that, but it would require you to sign a confidentiality agreement with Meridian. I hesitated. Signing any agreement with Meridian while under investigation for leaking information to them seemed like insanity. But if regional banking was hiding financial fraud, thousands of jobs and billions in investor funds were at risk. What exactly are you proposing? Join Meridian as a senior vice president. Help us conduct due diligence on regional banking's true financial position. If we find evidence of fraud, we'll provide it to the appropriate regulatory authorities. And we'll make sure your name is cleared in the process. And if I refuse? Then you'll spend the next 2 years fighting false charges while watching whoever framed you profit from their scheme. The merger will close, the fraud will eventually surface, and thousands of innocent people will lose their jobs and savings. Chen was right, and we both knew it. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate frame job to remove me from the regional banking deal, and they'd done it because I was getting too close to discovering something they wanted to keep hidden. I need guarantees, full legal immunity, complete access to your intelligence, and a commitment that any evidence of fraud gets reported to regulators regardless of how it affects Meridian's competitive position. Done. And I want to know everything. About who contacted you and how they tried to frame me. Already prepared. Chen reached into his laptop bag and withdrew a thick folder. This contains everything our security team uncovered, including the identity of the person who approached us. I opened the folder and found myself staring at a photograph clipped to the first page. It showed a man in his 50s with graying hair and expensive clothes standing outside what appeared to be a private airport terminal. Who is this? Marcus Webb, Regional Banking's chief financial officer. The coffee shop seemed to tilt around me. Marcus Webb was the executive I'd worked most closely with during the merger negotiations. He'd provided me with financial reports, answered hundreds of questions about Regional Banking's operations, and even helped me structure the deal terms to maximize value for both companies. Marcus approached you? He's the one who tried to frame me? According to our investigation, yes. He's also the person most likely to have access to the kind of detailed financial information someone has been trying to hide. I stared at Webb's photograph, remembering our numerous meetings and phone calls over the past 18 months. He'd seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the merger, talking passionately about the opportunities it would create for Regional Banking's employees and customers. But why would he sabotage a deal that benefits his own company? That's what we need to find out. But Ms. Martinez, whatever his motivation, he's succeeded in removing you from the equation. The merger is proceeding without the one person who might have uncovered whatever he's hiding. I closed the folder and looked directly at Chen. If I do this, if I join Meridian and help you investigate Regional Banking, what happens when we find the truth? We expose it. Publicly, completely, and immediately. Even if it destroys the merger and costs Meridian a competitive advantage? Especially then. Ms. Martinez, Meridian wants to compete in the regional banking market, but we want to compete fairly. If regional banking is built on fraud, then the entire industry suffers. I thought about Patricia Stevens, Regional Banking's CEO, who had impressed me with her vision and integrity during our negotiations. If Webb was hiding financial problems from her, she was being betrayed just as much as I was. All right, I'll do it. But I have one more condition. Name it. When we expose this, I want to be the one who presents the evidence, publicly. I want everyone to know that Rebecca Martinez uncovered the fraud that Marcus Webb tried to hide. Chen smiled for the first time since we'd met. Ms. Martinez, I think you and Meridian are going to work very well together. As we shook hands across the small table, I felt something I hadn't experienced since walking out of Pinnacle's offices earlier that evening. Purpose. Someone had tried to destroy my career and reputation, but they'd made a critical error. They'd underestimated exactly how far Rebecca Martinez was willing to go to uncover the truth. Friday morning arrived with Chicago's typical October chill. But I barely noticed the cold as I walked through the revolving doors of Meridian Capital Group's headquarters on Wacker Drive. The contrast with Pinnacle's traditional marble and mahogany aesthetic was striking. Meridian's lobby featured sleek glass surfaces, contemporary art, and digital displays showing real-time market data from around the world. David Chen met me at the executive elevator bank, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression that suggested he'd been awake most of the night. How are you holding up? He asked as we rode to the 42nd floor. Honestly, I'm furious, and that's keeping me focused. The elevator opened directly into Meridian's executive conference center, where Chen led me to a secure briefing room. The space was designed for sensitive discussions. No windows, soundproof walls, and electronic countermeasures to prevent eavesdropping. 3 other people were already seated around the oval table. Rebecca, let me introduce our investigation team, Chen began. This is Sarah Kim, our head of forensic accounting. Next to her is James Morrison, our chief information security officer. And this is Amanda Foster, our regulatory compliance director. Each team member had thick folders in front of them, and the wall-mounted displays showed financial charts and organizational diagrams that I recognized as relating to regional banking. Consortium, Sarah Kim spoke first, her voice crisp and professional. Ms. Martinez, we've been analyzing regional banking's financial reports since yesterday evening. What we've found is deeply concerning. She activated a wall display showing regional banking's balance sheet over the past 3 years. On the surface, their numbers look stable. But when we dig deeper into the subsidiary structures and intercompany transactions, a different picture emerges. The display changed to show a complex web of subsidiary companies, shell corporations, and offshore entities. Regional banking has been using this network to move problem assets between subsidiaries, essentially hiding losses from regulators and potential acquirers. I studied the diagram, recognizing some subsidiary names from the merger documents but seeing others for the first time. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate, $1.2 billion in hidden losses over the past 18 months, Kim replied. The actual number could be significantly higher. The magnitude hit me like a physical blow. If regional banking was hiding over $1 billion in losses, the $2.8 billion merger price wasn't just overvalued, it was catastrophically wrong. Pinnacle would be acquiring a company worth far less than they believed, potentially destroying both organizations in the process. James Morrison leaned forward. The technical sophistication of this scheme is impressive. They've been using advanced algorithmic trading to create artificial transaction volumes, making their trading desks appear more profitable than they actually are. The algorithms are designed to show profits in regulatory reports while hiding the corresponding losses in subsidiary accounts. But how did Marcus Webb pull this off without regional banking's CEO knowing? I asked. Patricia Stevens struck me as extremely hands-on during our negotiations. Amanda Foster opened her folder and withdrew several documents. That's where this gets interesting. We believe Stevens isn't complicit. She's another victim. Webb has been providing her with manipulated reports that show a sanitized version of the company's financial position. Foster activated another display showing email communications and meeting records. Our intelligence suggests Webb has been planning this for over 2 years. He's been systematically restructuring regional banking's subsidiary network to create hidden pockets where losses can be concealed. But why? I was struggling to understand Webb's motivation. What does he gain from destroying his own company? Chen pulled out his laptop and connected it to the room's presentation system. We think we found the answer to that question. The screen displayed a series of financial transactions involving offshore accounts and shell companies. Marcus Webb has been systematically shorting regional banking stock while simultaneously hiding the company's losses. When the hidden losses eventually surface, the stock price will collapse, and Webb will profit from his short positions. The scheme's elegance was horrifying. Webb wasn't just embezzling money. He was orchestrating the destruction of his own company while betting against its survival. The merger with Pinnacle was simply a way to maximize the eventual damage when the fraud was discovered. How much has he made from this? I asked. So far? Approximately $47 million in unrealized gains from his short positions, Morrison replied. But if the merger goes through and the fraud is discovered afterward, his total profit could exceed $200 million. I stared at the numbers on the screen, feeling sick. Webb wasn't just stealing money. He was preparing to destroy thousands of jobs and wipe out billions in retirement savings for his personal profit. There's more, Foster continued. Webb has been recruiting accomplices inside regional banking. We've identified at least 3 other executives who are aware of the scheme and receiving payment for their participation. The display showed photographs and financial records for regional banking's head of internal audit, deputy CFO, and chief risk officer. All 3 had received substantial payments through the same offshore network Webb was using. This is a full-scale conspiracy, I said quietly. How many people at regional banking know the truth? Our estimate is fewer than 10 people are fully aware of the scheme, Kim replied. But the damage extends far beyond the immediate conspirators. When this fraud surfaces, it will destroy regional banking completely and likely trigger regulatory investigations across the entire regional banking sector. The implications were staggering. Regional banking employed over 8,000 people across 6 states. Their collapse would devastate communities throughout the Midwest, destroy pension funds that had invested in their stock, and create a crisis of confidence that could bring down other regional banks. And Pinnacle? I asked, though I already knew the answer. If the merger closes and the fraud is discovered afterward, Pinnacle will face catastrophic losses that could force them into bankruptcy, Chen replied. The combined entity would inherit all of regional banking's hidden liabilities, while lacking the capital to absorb the losses. I thought about my former colleagues at Pinnacle, analysts, support staff, and executives who had no idea they were about to be destroyed by Webb's scheme. Jonathan Whitmore's betrayal stung, but thousands of innocent employees didn't deserve to lose their careers because of one man's greed. David, what's our timeline? How long before the fraud surfaces naturally? Morrison consulted his notes. Webb has been very careful to structure the scheme so the hidden losses won't appear in regular reporting cycles. Our analysis suggests he can maintain the deception for at least 12 to 18 months after the merger closes, giving him time to maximize his short positions before the collapse, I said. Exactly. And by then, he'll have disappeared with his profits while leaving thousands of people to deal with the consequences. I stood up and walked to the windowless wall, trying to process everything I'd learned. 24 hours ago, I'd thought, I was the victim of a simple corporate betrayal. Now I understood I'd stumbled into a fraud scheme that could destroy the entire regional banking sector. What evidence do we have that would stand up in court? I asked. Foster opened another folder. Substantial circumstantial evidence, but proving intent will be challenging. Webb has been very careful to maintain plausible deniability. The offshore accounts are technically legal, the subsidiary transactions follow proper procedures, and the algorithmic trading could be explained as legitimate business activity. So we need smoking gun evidence that proves deliberate fraud? Or we need someone with inside access to gather direct evidence of Webb's intentions, Chen said meaningfully. I turned back to face the team. You want me to go undercover? Not. Exactly. We want you to use your knowledge of the merger to identify specific evidence that would prove fraud. You know regional banking's operations better than anyone outside the company. You know which documents would contain the proof we need. Kim activated a new display showing regional banking's organizational chart. Webb has been careful, but every fraud scheme has vulnerabilities. The challenge is knowing where to look and what questions to ask. And how exactly would I gain access? To regional banking's internal documents? I'm not exactly welcome at either company right now. Morrison smiled for the first time since I'd met him. Ms. Martinez, you'd be surprised what a talented information security professional can accomplish with the right motivation. Chen opened his laptop again and showed me a secure communication interface. We've been developing capabilities to gather intelligence on potential acquisition targets. Some of those capabilities could be repurposed to investigate fraud. I understood what they were suggesting. Meridian had the technical resources to conduct electronic surveillance of regional banking's internal systems. It wasn't strictly legal, but it might be the only way to gather evidence before Webb's scheme destroyed both companies. What are you proposing exactly? Limited electronic access to regional banking's internal email and document systems, Morrison explained, specifically focused on communications between Webb and his co-conspirators. We're not talking about broad surveillance, just targeted intelligence gathering to document the fraud. Foster leaned forward. Any evidence we gather through electronic means wouldn't be admissible in criminal court, but it could guide a regulatory investigation and provide grounds for civil action. And it would give us the leverage to expose the scheme before the merger damages either company, Chen added. I thought about the ethical implications. Electronic surveillance of a private company was clearly illegal, regardless of the justification. But allowing Webb's fraud to proceed would destroy thousands of lives and potentially destabilize the entire regional banking system. If we do this, I want guarantees. Full legal immunity for everyone involved and a commitment that any evidence we gather gets turned over to appropriate authorities immediately. Already arranged, Foster replied, producing a document from her folder. Meridian has retained outside counsel specializing in white-collar crime. They've prepared immunity agreements and established protocols for evidence handling. I reviewed the legal documents, noting they'd been prepared by one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. Meridian wasn't just proposing corporate espionage, they'd created a comprehensive legal framework to ensure any evidence would be properly handled. "There's one more thing," Chen said quietly. "Patricia Stevens contacted me this morning. That caught my attention immediately. Regional Banking's CEO called you directly? She's concerned about irregularities she's discovered in some of Webb's recent reports. Apparently, she's been conducting her own quiet investigation and found discrepancies that don't make sense. The implications were significant. If Stevens was already suspicious of Webb's activities, she might be willing to cooperate with our investigation. More importantly, her cooperation would provide legal cover for our activities. What did you tell her?" "That Meridian has information relevant to Regional Banking's financial situation and would like to schedule a confidential meeting. She agreed to meet tomorrow evening." I felt the pieces of a plan beginning to form. With Stevens' cooperation, we could conduct a legitimate investigation of Webb's activities. With Meridian's resources, we could gather the evidence needed to expose the fraud. And with my knowledge of the merger, we could ensure the investigation focused on the right targets. "All right," I said finally. "Let's do this. But I want to be clear about our objectives. We're not just trying to stop the merger or help Meridian gain a competitive advantage. We're trying to prevent a fraud that could destroy thousands of lives." Saturday evening found me sitting across from Patricia Stevens in a private dining room at the Union League Club, one of Chicago's most exclusive venues. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than 48 hours after being fired for allegedly conspiring against my employer, I was about to expose the real conspiracy that had destroyed my career. Stevens looked exhausted. The confident, sharp-eyed CEO I'd negotiated with for months appeared frayed around the edges, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. She'd aged years in the 2 days since I'd last seen her. "Ms. Martinez, I have to admit, I was surprised when Mr. Chen suggested this meeting," she began, stirring her coffee absently, "especially given the circumstances surrounding your departure from Pinnacle. Patricia, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I need you to know that everything you've been told about my alleged misconduct is fabricated." I slid a manila folder across the table. "This contains evidence that Marcus Webb has been systematically defrauding Regional Banking for over 2 years. The person who tried to frame me is your own chief financial officer." Stevens opened the folder slowly, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock as she reviewed the documents. Financial records, offshore account transfers, and communication intercepts that painted a clear picture of Webb's conspiracy. "This can't be right," she whispered, staring at a transaction record showing $47 million in short positions against her own company's stock. "Marcus has been with Regional Banking for 8 years. He helped build our current financial infrastructure." "Which is exactly why he was able to hide the fraud so effectively," I replied. "Patricia, Regional Banking isn't the healthy company you believe it to be. Webb has been concealing over $1.2 billion in losses while simultaneously betting against your stock price." Stevens continued reading, her face growing paler with each page. When she reached the organizational chart showing Webb's network of accomplices, she set the folder down and looked directly at me. "If this is true, then the merger with Pinnacle would destroy both companies when the fraud inevitably surfaces. Webb is planning to let that happen while he profits from the collapse. But why would he destroy his own company? It makes no sense." I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. Patricia Marcus Webb stopped caring about Regional Banking's survival the moment he realized he could make more money from its destruction. He's been planning this for years. Stevens was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Finally, she looked up. What do you need from me? Access to regional banking's internal systems and formal authorization to investigate Webb's activities. With your cooperation, we can gather evidence that will stand up in court and expose the conspiracy before it destroys both companies. And the merger will have to be called off. But, Patricia, that's the only way to save regional banking. If the merger proceeds with these hidden losses, both companies will collapse within 18 months. Stevens closed the folder and sat back, in her chair. Ms. Martinez, if I cooperate with this investigation, I'm essentially admitting that my own CFO has been defrauding the company under my watch. The regulatory consequences alone could destroy my career. And if you don't cooperate, Webb's scheme will destroy regional banking, Pinnacle, and thousands of innocent employees. The choice is yours, but time is running out. Stevens pulled out her phone and made a call. Security, this is Patricia Stevens. I need you to immediately suspend Marcus Webb's access to all regional banking systems. Yes, effective immediately. And I want his office sealed until further notice. She hung up and looked at me with grim determination. Ms. Martinez, you have my full authorization to investigate this matter. What do you need? The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Working from Meridian's secure facilities, our investigation team conducted a comprehensive audit of regional banking's financial records. With Stevens's authorization and Morrison's technical expertise, we gained access to internal communications that revealed the full scope of Webb's conspiracy. The evidence was damning. Email chains showing Webb coordinating with offshore money managers, internal memos discussing how to hide losses from regulatory audits, and financial projections that proved he knew regional banking was heading for collapse. Most shocking was a recorded phone conversation from 3 weeks earlier, where Webb discussed accelerating the merger timeline to maximize damage potential when the fraud eventually surfaced. By Sunday morning, we had assembled a comprehensive evidence package that documented every aspect of the conspiracy. The fraud was even worse than our initial estimates. Webb had concealed $1.8 billion in losses while positioning himself to profit over $300 million from regional banking's eventual collapse. At 9 a.m., Patricia Stevens called an emergency board meeting. At 10 a.m., she personally delivered our evidence package to the FBI's Chicago field office. At 11 a.m., federal agents arrested Marcus Webb at his Lake Forest mansion as he was attempting to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands. The regional banking world exploded into chaos. By noon, trading in both regional banking and Pinnacle stock had been suspended pending regulatory investigation. Financial news networks led with breaking coverage of what reporters were calling the largest corporate fraud scheme in Midwest banking history. I watched the coverage from Meridian's executive conference room, surrounded by the team that had helped expose the conspiracy. On screen, FBI agents were carrying boxes of evidence out of regional banking's headquarters, while reporters speculated about the merger's fate. David Chen turned to me with a satisfied expression. Ms. Martinez, I think it's time for your press conference. The Meridian Capital Group Media Center was packed with reporters from every major financial publication. I stood at the podium wearing a navy blue suit that Chen's assistant had procured, looking out at cameras from Bloomberg, CNBC, and the Wall Street Journal. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rebecca Martinez. Until Friday afternoon, I was Senior Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions at Pinnacle Financial Group. I'm here today to tell you how I uncovered the largest corporate fraud in regional banking history. I spent the next 30 minutes walking through the entire story. My 18 months of work on the regional banking merger, the fabricated accusations that led to my termination, and the investigation that revealed Marcus Webb's conspiracy. The questions came fast and aggressive. Reporters wanted to know about Meridian's role, the legal implications for both companies, and the broader impact on the regional banking sector. Ms. Martinez called out a reporter from the Chicago Tribune. Some are suggesting that your cooperation with Meridian Capital Group represents a conflict of interest. How do you respond to those allegations? I respond by pointing to the evidence, I replied firmly. Marcus Webb was prepared to destroy two major financial institutions and thousands of jobs for personal profit. Stopping that fraud was more important than any competitive considerations. What happens to the merger now? Asked a Bloomberg correspondent. The merger is dead. Regional banking will need to focus on rebuilding its financial position and restoring investor confidence. Pinnacle will need to find new growth strategies that don't involve acquiring fraudulent companies. After the press conference, I returned to Meridian's offices to find David Chen waiting with a bottle of champagne and a contract. Rebecca, you've just conducted one of the most successful corporate investigations in financial services history. Meridian would be honored to have you lead our new forensic division. I looked at the contract, noting the substantial salary increase and equity package. 6 months ago, it would have been a dream job. But the events of the past week had changed my perspective on what really mattered. David, I'm flattered by the offer, but I have a different plan. I walked to the window overlooking the Chicago River, where I could see Pinnacle's building in the distance. I'm starting my own firm, a consulting company that specializes in merger due diligence and fraud detection. Someone needs to make sure this kind of scheme never happens again. Chen smiled and raised his champagne glass. To Rebecca Martinez, fraud fighter and corporate justice warrior. 3 months later, Martinez Financial Consulting occupied a small but elegant office in River North. My first client was a mid-sized bank in Minneapolis that needed due diligence on a potential acquisition. My second was a whistleblower from a pharmaceutical company who suspected accounting irregularities. The regional banking scandal continued to reverberate through the financial world. Marcus Webb was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Patricia Stevens successfully restructured regional banking and restored its financial stability, eventually leading a successful IPO that made the company stronger than ever. Jonathan Whitmore resigned from Pinnacle in disgrace after internal investigations revealed he'd ignored several warning signs about the regional banking deal. The company survived the scandal, but never fully recovered its market position. As for me, I discovered that being fired from the biggest deal of my career was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. Because sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find out what you're truly capable of achieving. And Marcus Webb? He learned the hard way that when you try to destroy Rebecca Martinez, you better make sure you finish the job. Because if you don't, she'll spend every waking moment making sure you pay for what you've done. That $2.8 billion merger he tried to steal from me? It became the foundation for a career dedicated to exposing corporate fraud and protecting innocent investors from predators like him. In the end, the best revenge wasn't signing with their biggest rival. It was making sure Marcus Webb would never hurt anyone again. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.